Do you ever think about the balance between your family dynamic and the relationship that was formed between you and your father and your mother, and how that has neurologically reformed and reshaped each of our brains here today as we sit here as adult human beings?
Because honestly, same.
Because indubitably.
Indubitably, I say.
Indubitably, same.
See, I'm the only one that doesn't have glasses, and everybody can just...
A monocle.
Maybe that's it.
You just gotta get a top hat, and you gotta be like this.
You guys have...
Glasses?
Yeah, you guys have glasses, a monocle, and a top hat, and an awkward relationship sometimes with your family that you're not really sure how to navigate?
Because honestly, same.
Because
Honestly, same.
Because indubitably.
Same. And cue the music. Honestly, same.
Ooh, honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly,
Honestly,
same.
same. Honestly,
Honestly, same. Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Honestly, same.
Indubitably same.
That's not as good of a song.
It's not. But you know what? It doesn't matter what the song is because hello, everybody.
Hi, friends.
Hi. Welcome back to the show. This is Honestly Same. I am Ross.
I am Leah.
I'm Brittany.
And we're going to talk all about family dynamics and relationships here in this episode. Indubitably, if I do say so myself. You already turned the mic a bunch.
I didn't touch it. I didn't touch it.
Also, you're saying the new studio's haunted, is what you're saying.
When you watch that back, you can text me an apology. I swear.
Oh
What do you
my
want me to do with it?
gosh.
Like this?
Rotate it.
This way?
More. Yes, right in there. Man,
So that
listen,
it's-
if there's a ghost.
Okay. I'll tell you one thing. I did turn it, but I thought I was doing the right thing.
Here she goes lying again.
I know. I had to get one in per episode.
There was Brittany. She's lying again. Can't ever tell the truth. Anyway, I hope we're about to tell the truth about our subject in this episode. So yeah, we're going to talk about family dynamics, family relationships. Last season, we talked a lot about growing up. We each told our own individual stories. We talked about what becoming an adult looks like, all that sort of stuff. But we never really dove into like our actual family dynamics, what those look like. Of course, there's bits and pieces that shined through of whether there was divorced parents or non-divorced parents, or what those relationships look like, and all that sort of stuff. But we're gonna dig in this episode
We're gonna really dig our knives and forks into
our families.
Yeah.
In this episode. Well, how do we kick this one off? Do we want to kind of just like lay out like what our relationships are with like kind of immediate family?
Well, let's talk
Unless anybody
about
wants to break down their
our
family.
immediate family.
Yes.
Like, let's tell the viewers, because obviously I know like how many brothers and sisters and all of that stuff. So let's just like lay it out for the people, you know?
Yeah.
You people. I am one of 3 children. I have 2 older sisters. I am the baby. I have parents that are still married to this day. And I grew up in like a family dynamic where we were pretty close, I would say. So that's like a general overview of me. What about you guys?
Brittany?
I have divorced parents since I was 4. I have an older brother via my dad before my mom and my dad met, a brother with my mom and my dad, and then I don't want to mess up how many siblings I have. A younger brother and a younger sister. Are we just doing that, and then we'll talk about dynamic after?
Yeah,
My obviously my parents are not together,
Yeah.
and neither are my dad and my stepmom. So it's like, just keep cutting the pie.
Perfect. It's smaller and smaller slices.
Yes.
So my parents were, they were together, but they were never married.
Okay.
So, perma-divorced, I guess
Wedlock
is what
baby.
you could say. Yes, I was a surprise and or accident, depending on which way you want to look at it. But yeah, my parents were never actually married or anything like that. So no divorce, but they weren't together. And then I have on my dad's side, I have a sister and then a stepsister. And then on my mom's side, I have 2 sisters that are twins. They don't look alike. And then a younger brother.
I don't know why
oldest.
I didn't know that they were twins.
They are twins. Yes. Yes. What is it called when they're not?
Fraternal.
Fraternal. Yes. And then, a younger brother. I am the oldest of all of my siblings. I was the first one here.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm the oldest girl, so that's something different as far as family dynamics go that we can get into later.
Yeah. So what? Well, we had touched on season 1 about like we did kind of dive into like, oh, well, what is it like being not the oldest child compared to the oldest child and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. I feel like I want to dive more into like what now that we've established like, all right, here's our immediate family, here's siblings, mom, dad, all that sort of stuff. Let's dive into like that actual dynamic part, what that
Yes.
was like, because it's weird because I do feel like whenever I share my story of growing up, a big portion of mine always tends to land on the stepmom I used to have. And that's a person who's not even in my life anymore, right? Outside
Right.
of she is the mother to my sister.
Yes.
But I feel like I never totally dive into like what, I don't know. It's because that's actually a weird thing when I like think back to like my story episode in season 1. I was like, man, you like didn't really talk about like your actual family. You talked about this like
It's like snippets. Yeah.
traumatic experience with a
Well,
with a
because it
stepmom. She
was
takes up-
big. Yeah, she did unfortunately take up a big part of your
It
childhood in
shaped
that
you
way.
Right.
in a way that was different.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll dive into kind of like actual family and how that shaped me. I feel like, and maybe I'm jumping too forward here, and maybe you guys are like, no, start it here or something. But I often think I'm like, I was adopted or I'm an alien from another planet that was dropped to my family because like, while I definitely look like like for sure, I'm so different than them. So different. And like, even if we were webbing out into other parts of our family, like I'm an absolute alien.
Is it like-
compared to everybody?
The nature of things, is that how you think? Is it?
It's how I think. It's just like how I live my life. It's like what I do.
Do you feel like you're fighting the things that you see, like with being different? Do you feel like you're fighting not to be different, but like, oh, I don't want that, so I'm doing this,
But
or
that's what I try and think about. Like when I think of that dynamic growing up, like I just grew up in a super small Southern Ohio town. There's not really a lot going on to necessarily make me different than my
Right.
mom, my dad, my grandparents, my siblings, like whatever. There was nothing really, you know what I mean? I was artsy as a child and that's like pretty much it. So that's what I always think of in like the dynamic part is I'm like, why did I just randomly grow up to be vastly different than and like see the world insanely different than? And I'm not even talking like politically or something like that. I'm just talking like how we view like the world and possibilities and what's
Do you feel like your siblings probably feel that way as well? Like, do you feel like they can connect to each other, or do you feel like you're kind of the only one that?
I literally feel like I'm kind of the only one. Like my siblings have like small things about them that are like, oh, okay, you're changing this way of living life compared to our family. Like, all right, I can see you're trying to change that dynamic up a little bit, but like honestly, not really at the same time. And that's something like now that they're all of adult age, I've actually been more excited to be like, oh man, I can't wait. Like I want to talk life with you. I want you to ask me questions. I want you to blah, blah, blah. And either, they're also probably learning how to be comfortable as adults in general. And, they don't know to come up to me and be like, hey, can you tell me
Right.
about life? Like they're probably just not thinking of that
Yeah.
necessarily. But nobody's diving off the deep end like I did necessarily. You know
Do
what I
you
mean?
feel like you're kind of the black sheep?
Oh, 1,000,000%.
Are you perceived that way, or you perceive yourself that way?
I perceive myself that way. None of them are ever like, no,
You're just like their
there's-
brother, their son, in their eyes.
Yeah, 100%. They're like, oh, wow, like sometimes we don't understand what you do, but like we love you. Can't
Yeah.
wait to see you again. Like, you know what I mean? But I think that also leads into a dynamic of like, whenever I go back to like visit or something, I feel like I'm literally visiting a different planet. Like I feel like entering that town, I'm like, nothing here makes sense to me. Everything's so strange. And so I always try and piece together, like, how did I grow up here? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And so, like, even digging into that a little bit, and, like, I'll just lay this out so we can each kind of, like, jump into ours. But, like, when I think about that dynamic as a whole, it was never, like, bad. There was obviously the drama that
Right.
comes with the stepmom I had for a while, and that, like, completely divided my family. And I've talked like extensively about that in season 1. But when I look at how I was like growing up or anything like that, there was not like I don't know how I think so differently than all of them.
Like there was no defining moment or anything like that. Yeah, I
But
feel like
okay,
No.
have you always, like when you were little, were you like, why am I seeing things differently? Why am I interested in different things? Or was it when you got older and you wanted to leave?
I think it was kind of always there. Like I always felt a little like, why are we acting like this, or why are we doing this? Again, not that it was terrible or bad.
It just wasn't what you thought.
I was just like, oh, this is, and I'm sure, yes, some of like how I have ended up does come from like my family doing hopefully a good job, what someone would perceive as a good job of like raising me.
Right.
So I'm sure that, of course, a part of that comes from that. But there was also so many different times that could have gone the other way. I could have at any point in time taken the drama or trauma that was being persistently in my life until I was like 12 or 13 from that stepmom. I could have easily taken that, embodied it, and been like, my life's shitty because of this. Now I'm a fucking asshole.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I didn't. And I'm sure a lot of that was being balanced out by dynamic with the rest of family. But like, I'm interested, like maybe Brittany, you can take it from here of like also having like split family and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
What was that dynamic like? Do you like, I don't know, do you identify anything where you're like, oh yeah, I can see like from this side and that side?
Yes. I feel very similar, but I think that I don't question it. I think I just know I'm entering a new world. Like when I go home, or I'm just like not necessarily entering a new world, almost like time stopped, and like it will always be the same in my mom's house. It'll always be the same vibes in my dad's house because they are just who they are to their core. So I guess I stopped questioning it, or I guess I never did. I guess I've never like really been like, why am I so different? I just know that I am.
Yeah, see, I wonder that all the time.
I think that I just was always in my own head, so I just assumed I was always like coming to my own conclusions, and that's how I ended up that way. Versus like a lot of people are really like receptive to what their parents say. If your parents say we're going to church and God is real, lots of kids are like, we're going to church and God is real. Mm-hmm. I would have been like, ask a really insensitive question right now as a child.
Right.
And some children don't do that. And my mom was really respectful of like me being that way. So I feel like she just let me be who I wanted to be. And so I never realized I was any different because I was just accepted, and they were their own humans. So I let them do their things, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I kind of, it's almost like a museum, you go to like, if I go to my husband's parents' house, it's a certain way. And it's been that way the last 10 years we've been together. My mom's house has been the same. My grandparents' house is the same. And I just, you just gear up to like be in that world.
Sure. Yeah. You have to put yourself in a different mode.
But I also think that they come to my house and they're like, what is this? Yeah. How did you get here?
Right. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. Leah, what do you feel like your dynamic was growing up?
I feel like my dynamic was a lot of being the kid that sat there and watched other things happen, and I was kind of just along for the ride. And so I was very much like do what my parents say kind of a kid, and just like get through the years of my life that I feel like were difficult. Like, when you get to be a teenager and you want to rebel and you have those moments, I had them for sure. And I felt like there were definitely times where I felt like nobody understands me, like most teenagers do. But for the most part, I feel like all in all, like I don't feel like I didn't necessarily fit with my family. I think for me, it was more so I would look at all of us and think, how are we all so different? Mm-hmm. Like, I think my parents balance each other out very well. And I think that my sisters and I are also different, that like, in some ways I'm like, how did we have the same upbringing that like we have such different, like just views on things in the world, or, we have such different personalities and tendencies. So I don't necessarily think necessarily like I'm a black sheep or I don't fit there or anything like that, but it's more so that I feel like we are all so vastly different. And nowadays we all live in such different places. Nobody lives where I grew up anymore. So nothing really feels the same as it used to. So like you guys probably have this feeling of going back home and going back to where you grew up, and it's almost like a nostalgia type thing. So now for me, the house that I grew up in was sold in 2020, and I have one sister that's in Connecticut. She's about to move to Texas. And then I have another that's in Detroit, which is, only a few hours of a drive away. And then my parents are typically like for most of the year in Florida. So anytime I see any of them, it's almost a just complete different setting. And I feel like we are completely different people from who we were back then in a lot of ways, but there are still things that resonate with me where I'll be like, oh yeah, like that tracks, like, oh, the way that you handled this situation or the way that you responded to this like joke. Like there's like resonant like pieces of like who everybody is, but I don't think that there's anything where it feels like it's just like, yeah, like time stood still and everybody's still where they were. It almost feels like everybody's moving at such a different pace that it's hard to kind of keep up with everybody to a point where I feel like I'm still, I don't want to say like relevant in their lives, but like in a way, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't necessarily know what's going on with them all the time. They don't necessarily know what's going on with me all the time. We'll, call or text every now and then and like keep up. And I think I talk to my parents probably more than I talk to my sisters, but like all in all, it's like everything's kind of been changing since, they moved, everybody moved away. So I'm the only one that's even actually in Ohio anymore at this point, and we all started here.
Yeah.
Which is
I
weird.
really admire people that like call their parents every day or talk to their parents like that often. I don't know if it's because I'm a parent, so I need to take care of my kids. So I don't, that's like
absolutely.
not the first thing that pops in my head. But I think that's great to like keep that relationship. I just wonder like how common it is. I mean, I love my mom and my dad and I talk to them often, but not like.
I will say I have one sister that has a 16-year-old and obviously like he's off doing his own thing most of the time. But my other sister that has 3 young boys, it's like hard to get her to even like see or respond to a message at this point in her life right now. Like she tries and she's like working towards, like being able to like, like I know she FaceTimes my mom at least, like on a pretty regular basis. But yeah, having kids I feel like is such a big like just part of your life, and it's so consuming of your time. And of course your parents I'm sure want to be involved in your kids' lives, but it's like it's just one of those things where you're putting so much of you into them that you're not necessarily worried about like, well, you're here. I know you're here and I can talk to you about stuff if I need you.
And that's the kind of nice thing, regardless of, parents being humans with flaws and all of that. They're still at the end of the day, at least with us, I think at this table, like our parents and they love us.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have that in the back of our mind, regardless of like the circumstances we've come from.
Right. Right. Well, that's like something else I want to touch on too is like, what do you feel like your guys is like? So if we're literally looking at like mom and dad, what were the individual dynamics like with each of them? Because like I've told my story on the show before, but like just to kind of reiterate a little bit, it's like my family was divided. There was 2 halves. Like I feel like I experienced nearly 2 different lives on one side.
Like 2 separate planes of life almost.
Yeah.
Depending on which parent you were with.
Right. Because like on my dad's side, when that stepmom was around, she was more like materialistic than anything. It was like a nicer house and she would buy me anything I wanted because that's how she was like trying to get my love and want me to like her more than my actual mom. And so it was like that side, and I'm sure they weren't always like perfectly well off on my, I'm sure. Right. But when I think about that, it was like, oh, here's every video game you want. Here's every toy you want. Here's trips to the mall. Here's whatever that's flashy. But I didn't feel that like, I don't want to say genuine love because there was there. And that also makes it sound like this is another thing that like when I do tell the story of my stepmom, I always kind of cast my dad aside because I'm so focused on her. Like I never want it to sound like he didn't love me or didn't care about me. He was just caught up in whatever was probably going on between them at that point in time too, of him navigating.
She's clearly very manipulative.
Yes. So it was like I felt that love and like grandparents on that side and stuff like that. But again, everything was coated in this dark cloud of like, oh, everything's uncomfortable and scary and you're terrified of this person and it sucks.
And it sounded to me like when we talked about this last season, like you almost didn't feel like you could even confide in your dad or talk to him about what was going on with you and your stepmom, or even just like have a discussion about things that were important to you because of the ramifications that might happen
Exactly.
to either of you if the conversation happened and she found
Yes.
out.
Yes, because he was very much like under that control. So it was like, don't know how to bring any of this up to him. Anytime it was, he would immediately make it my mom's fault. He would be like, you're just telling him things, blah, blah, blah. And so it was like, my dad, it's weird because like both my parents are very emotional. So I know
Okay.
that that's why I am just a ball of emotion at all points in time. However, how they handle it is where I get different, right? It's like it's super easy for me to cry, 1,000,000%. Depending on where this conversation goes, I might cry in this conversation.
Brittany will probably cry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cry every episode. But like my dad, even though he's a very easy crier, he won't otherwise express his emotions very well. He's not necessarily
He's not
the,
like communicating it.
not really. Until it's like there's literally no choice but to address it, and even then it's kind of awkwardly talked about. And you don't, so like when those things were being brought to the surface of like, hey, this is an issue we need to talk about, his only response was, I'm mad that we have to talk about this. So it was anger. And so it was like, oh.
And then it's hard to even have a conversation
Yeah.
when that's the basis that you're going off
Of course. And it's like, oh, well, she's going to be mad if she finds out about this. And now he's mad. And then now I'm just
And
sitting
you're
here
literally
terrified.
just, trying to find a safe space.
Right. Where then like all of that dynamic on the flip side, at my mom's side of things, it was way more about like, hey, we're not as like quote unquote well off, whatever that means. We're not being like showered with toys and all this sort of stuff. We would have the stuff that we wanted, but like it wasn't about that. It was way more like, what are actual things we can do for fun? Do we actually like, there was like family game nights at my mom's and stuff, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, hey, let's try and be like actual, like, do we actually care? And do we actually like,
Right.
my mom would verbalize why it matters to care about somebody, why it matters to treat somebody nicely, like all that sort of stuff. While of course navigating all the chaos of everything else that was going on.
Of course. Do you think, so it sounds like, now did you guys ever have like growing up, like do you feel like you talked about mental health at all?
Oh no. Yeah, I don't think
What
that
about you,
was
Brittany?
I don't think that was a thing for me.
My mom's house, yes. My dad's house, no.
Okay. See, in my house, it was just like literally like, it wasn't even something that I knew existed. Like, not necessarily that anybody was avoiding it or like, no, we don't talk about that. It just never came up. So that's why I was wondering, because it sounds like your mom was a little bit more, maybe mentally aware, more aware of mental health.
If it
in
would
that
have been talked
aspect.
about, there would have been aspects probably from her. I'm sure there's, if we could flash back to me at like 13, she probably been like, hey, if you ever think about like in your life, don't. Like, I'm sure there was
Right.
something
Yeah.
that was like, hey, she's like pushing some of this, but like to a point where I remember any of it, no. Because
Okay.
again, that whole stepmom situation was basically me from like my family dynamic until I was 12 or 13 was basically me feeling like I have zero control and that I'm like completely helpless in this situation.
And what were your siblings like during that time? Like, do you feel like they were coming into play in the same way? Like, obviously you had a sister for, like via your stepmom. Do you
Yeah.
feel like you guys were treated like differently at all? Do you think that like did you guys ever like have moments where, I know as adults you've had moments where you've discussed it and things like that, but like as kids, was it kind of like you were so different in age that you
was she
just
like kind of there in
experienced different
solidarity with you,
things?
or she just was in her own
So
world?
different in an age that like none of it was
Resonated
comparable
in the same way.
necessarily. Yeah,
Okay.
like none of it. Like the closest to me in age is my younger brother, and that's 7 years.
Oh, wow.
And so like I was the only one that was kind of like like
Yeah.
aware enough to be really experiencing all this sort of stuff. No, I'm sure if we sat them down, they'd probably remember something or so, you know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
yeah, as far as like sister with that dynamic, we've talked about it now that she has experienced a lifetime's worth of interactions with that person. But then at that point in time, yeah, it was just me navigating all of that sort of stuff. And I started with all that to say that like for me growing up, I didn't have like a bad relationship with my dad. I won't say that at all. But it was a weird one.
Yeah.
Like it was weird because
it sounds like it got put on pause for the amount of time that she was involved in your
100%.
life.
The moment she was gone, night and day.
Yeah.
We fucking would like have fun family dinners. I would go like simple shit. Like at that point in time, like we would go and he would like he had a wood burner, so he would go and like chop wood or whatever. I'd get to go with him and just like hang out. That was like one of my favorite things we did during that time.
mountain men shit.
It's so crazy,
Like-
like the difference between like when you're getting thrown toys and whatever you want compared to like just quality time with your dad.
Oh, and that stuff, like, sure, I loved the toys at the time, but I, again, also was like, here's these toys, and I'm treating you like dog
Yeah.
shit. Where it's like, oh, now I just actually get to hang out with my dad, and like,
Here's the toy you wanted, you piece of shit.
literally, like, yeah, that's essentially what it was. And so it was like a night and day difference.
Yeah.
And obviously, unfortunately, he had to go through his loss in that. He
Right.
lost a wife and the now mom of his other child and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So that made that dynamic, which we can dig into. So this isn't just a me episode. We can dig into a little bit later of like, as I got older, what that dynamic also became with my dad.
Yeah. So childhood, it sounds like you had a rocky relationship with obviously your stepmom and a paused relationship with your dad. Your mom, it sounds like, was always pretty like
Yeah, definitely.
hands-on.
Yeah, there and like trying her best because like as any parent or any person does, we've all got mental and emotional issues that we don't know how to
Absolutely.
process. So there was definitely those sort of things. And I don't know if I should share it on this show. There were definitely, I'll just say problems that my mom had when I was younger that I do 100% remember.
yeah.
Not
Nobody's
necessarily
perfect, but
not like a traumatic, like, oh my God, but like there's one in particular thing that I like for sure very clearly remember that was like, oh, that was a wild situation.
Yeah.
As she was going through, again, her own life and her own
Right.
issues and battles and all that sort of stuff.
right.
But yeah, I feel like, yes, childhood was sort of that, like, again, talked about it a ton in season 1. I just talked about it more than what I even wanted to rehash because it's just the same story over and over. But like, yeah, my young childhood was just taken up of like, I was in the middle of a war that stepmom I had was creating
Yeah.
within my family.
Now, did your parents have an amicable split enough to a point where they could co-parent and it wasn't like they were fighting over you?
My dad moved on really quickly from my mom, so I got a stepmom really quickly after my parents split. But they were not like, my mom and dad were romantically done when they split, so it wasn't like a big deal that my dad moved on. But with my stepmom, and my stepmom and my mom have always been great together too. When
good.
my dad and stepmom ended up having kids, my little brother, my little sister, at very least my little brother, it was very much we were the second family, which was okay because my mom, you know, we were only there like every weekend or every other weekend, depending on like what time of year it was. But it really sucked because it put a lot of pressure on my mom really young. Because I mean, they got divorced when I was 4. My mom had me when she was 20.
Okay.
So she was a single mom at the age, we talked about this last episode, but at my age she had an 8 and a 7-year-old by herself. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy. But yeah, they co-parented well, mainly because my mom is a very strong woman and did what she had to do to make sure that we had the best life, even if that meant dealing with my dad when he wasn't always great. She always tried to do what was best for us.
That's really good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the like growing up for you, like early childhood, like what your dynamic was like with your parents, with your siblings, just like in general, like what was like little Brittany's life like? I know you said you were like maybe a little like troublemaker at
I
some point.
was. Me and my brother like fist fought every day, but just because it was just the two of us. My mom was a single mom. We stayed home, just the two of us. So it was always us.
What else are you gonna do, right?
What else are you gonna
You
do
beat the
other
crap
than like
out of each other.
WWE all the time? It would be the point where like we would be talking shit, and then it would be fist fighting, and then I would hurt him, and he would be like, "I'm gonna tell mom," and then I'd have to be like, "No, shh, it's okay, shh, it's okay, shh."
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, so many times.
I was the one that was getting the shh.
Yeah. It's the shh that you really remember. I was the shh-er. So we fought a lot, which in turn made my mom think that we were like these crazy kids, but we were really just like really comfortable with each other. If I had a difference in like opinion with my brother, it was safe to have that. Maybe not safe for him to have a different opinion than me, but it was safe for me.
Don't say that again, and I will punch you harder next time. Shh.
I did push him through a wall once, like fully through a
I
wall.
knocked my little brother's 2 front teeth out with a golf ball.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which one's worse? 2 front teeth. Because then what? Were they his baby teeth?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I carried him inside like a war victim. It was a war scene because like I wasn't even like doing it. I literally was just like I threw a golf ball. I don't know what I thought was gonna happen. Like he was on like our
God.
trampoline, and the trampoline had like a net.
That's what's so stupid about kids. That's so dumb.
And I literally like I just like lobbed it. I wasn't like huh. I was just like ah. And then it just somehow my aim. I mean, I was a good baseball player when I was a kid. Aim perfectly in his mouth. He starts freaking out. There's like blood dripping down. So I'm like, I got him on my
Oh
shoulder.
my
I'm
gosh.
crying. I like come inside. I'm like, we need a medic now.
Oh
And,
my
like, yeah.
gosh. But I feel like destruction wise, like a
Yeah.
wall is a lot harder to fix than like
yeah.
It is
than
true.
like Tooth Fairy comes and like he's like, all right, at least I got a couple bucks. out
It
of
was like an apartment wall, so they're not like the most sturdy. So I'm not like
Oh.
the strongest person ever. But I do remember he just
I
like,
was like just gonna like accept that you were hulking. but-
Yeah,
I was
that's cool.
hulking regardless, but he is very feisty like me. He was also like born to not. He constantly questions all authority. Even if you're authority for like 5 minutes, like someone's like, "Can you watch him so I can go to the bathroom, make sure he doesn't die?" You're not his boss. Like that's how he's been his whole life. He's always got to have the last word. And I don't know what our fight was about that day because I blacked out after he went through the wall.
Perfect.
But all I know is we came together so fast. Like I pushed him through the wall and then at the same time held his shoulders, brought him out and hugged him.
Oh my
I
god.
was like, we're crying because we're like, we're going down together. I know that I did this, but we're both going down for this.
He literally
Yeah.
just had him in.
What did your mom do?
So she had an elliptical and we told her that we were trying to carry it downstairs and that it like fell sideways and went through the wall. And we have told her since then what happened, but she did believe that.
Okay.
That's what
wow.
happened, which thank God, because you don't think that your like 9-year-old is pushing your 8-year-old into a wall or however we were probably like 11 and 10, but you assume that's not what happened when you hear there's a
Right.
hole in the wall. We also did try to put a poster over it. I can't remember what the poster was. And it was too small.
Incredible.
Oh my gosh, like Shawshank Redemption ass shit, where you're
Something.
just like
That's
in the middle of the night, you just peek through and you're like, "I'm watching you, you little shit. You better
So-
not tell mom I pushed you through this wall."
That's literally, we just had to like have an oath. But yeah, we just kind of only had each other. And then my mom would come home, make dinner. We would watch some shows. My mom was a really amazing mom, but there are only so many hours in the day. And when she's got nothing to do but to work so we can eat, I didn't really see her all that much. Even like through like being a teenager, it's just one of those things you're still trying to take care of 2 teenagers now
yeah.
and everything that comes with that. But my dad and I, as far as, are we talking about just that relationship then or like now as well?
I think we'll go into the future,
Okay.
like after we
Okay.
each make our points, because then
Yeah.
I think like carrying into like where we are with
That
our
makes sense.
family now is like
Um,
separate bullet
yeah,
points.
yeah.
We have bullet points,
We
people.
do.
We're
It's
structured.
season 2.
Season 2.
Bring some structure into this.
Me and my dad, we butted heads a lot because we're both mentally ill. And at
Fair.
the time, undiagnosed. And like when you are someone's child, it can get so heated because you're just going to get a piece of you back. You know, if you're
Oh,
shitty
yeah.
to me, I am you. Like, what do you expect is going to happen? And he was very, you're going to be a statistic if you have tattoos and blah, 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 blah. Wanted to be like that kind of dad. And I was like, you just don't have that kind of like authority. And I just was born knowing who I was. So it was really hard for him to accept that I didn't need his approval on anything. It didn't matter what he could say to me. Like, you could either accept it or not. And it took that for him to like kind of turn around and be like, I think you're like that I'm much smarter than he thought I was. He wanted to be like, if you do these, like, you're not thinking of yourself if you do these things. And it's like, maybe you don't know me if you're like fearful of these things
Yeah.
and you don't trust me.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
so there was just like there was a little time period where I was just like, you don't respect who I am.
Do you think there was a disconnect with him with your brother in the same way?
Yeah, because my brother's gay. So that took
Oh,
a
okay.
minute to like,
Is your dad religious? Or is it just
Um,
like his values happen to line up with the
I think
no
it just
tattoos?
stressed him out and like
There's
scared
the
him.
bunny.
And Let's go see the
Sorry.
bunny.
It's over.
My dad might be a little religious. I don't really know. He's never like practiced.
Okay.
I think he's just like an older white dude, and that is their normal.
That's fair.
Until, you know, my brother came out in like 2011.
Okay.
That was like the general reaction from the population when someone came out. But it took, my mom was just like, you can accept it now, like without doing whatever processing you need to do because this is your son, or like that's it. And he just like got his shit together then. But they don't have, not to like speak on my brother and my dad's relationship, they don't have the most amazing relationship because my brother is so like sure of himself and will always stick up for himself to the highest degree, where I have a soft spot for like anyone and will try to find the good in them.
Right.
But yeah, he's usually working on bettering himself. My dad's come a long way.
Well, that's a good thing. And I think like even just talking about like, because my question was more so like, was he more like, I don't want to say hard on you, but a little bit more critical of who you were trying to be because you were a girl and he wanted you to be this like pure.
Yeah, partially,
like,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Like you're always my little girl and it's like, no, I'm maturing and I'm my own human. At the end of the day, before I'm anything, I'm myself.
Yes.
But yeah, so, and it is, there's something, yeah, there's no, a dad does not own their daughter. I know that it's like, of course you're like, you're my little girl forever, but I'm also a whole human and you have to respect that first. And I think a lot of dads need to like understand that.
Yeah. And then as far as your like, I know you have an older brother as well, you said, right? So what was the dynamic like with your older brother?
Did I tell the story on here about how I met my older brother?
Yes.
Okay. I only met him like that time, and I think we hung out one more time, like that our moms orchestrated. And then I didn't really see him for like a really long time until he reached out to my dad once he was an adult.
Okay.
We don't really have a relationship because he's got like a really great family that he grew up with.
Okay.
And a sister that is my exact age that has been his best friend his whole life.
Yeah.
But at like family get-togethers and stuff, we're there and we catch up and stuff. It is weird to have a sibling that I don't know.
Yeah. And the younger ones, they're how much younger than you?
Chance is 21 and Quinn just turned 14.
And how do you feel as far as your relationship with them? Like, I mean, obviously as like the older sister, like you have your younger brother, but he's like a year younger than you. But to be that like that big of a difference, especially with your sister being 14, like, do you feel like you guys are like, are you the kind of person where you're like, I feel like I get to help guide them? Or are you kind of disconnected where you're like, I'm just watching them from afar grow up and I get to be part of it?
Until she turned like 12, we were like inseparable, sleepovers, everything. But now she's going through her teenage angst and I'm trying to respect it as much as I can. I think I'm as close as she will allow me to be in the stage that she's in.
Yeah.
But like, I would still say that we're pretty close. And if she really needs something, she'd reach out. And then Chance, I think we are like, we have the exact relationship that we'll always have, which is like, we love each other. We miss each other. We have the best time when we hang out, but there's no like, I don't know. It's mainly like once every couple of months. There's no need to like call every day or anything like that. We kind of understand that everyone's living separate lives.
Okay. Well, that's good though. Yeah. I feel like that sounds like everybody's got like a healthy balance as far as like sibling stuff goes. And Ross, as far as like your siblings, I know you have a sister like with your stepmom and then you have your twin sisters, you have your brother, and everybody still lives like somewhat close to here, right? I mean, or Crooksville.
So my sister goes to college in Cincinnati now.
Okay.
So she has moved away. Then my twin sisters, one still lives in like Zanesville, so like the area. Another one is going to college in Findlay.
Okay.
So sort of like branching out a little bit. And then my brother lives in like I'll just say like around like Zanesville area. He's definitely kind of like in that world. And then my stepsister currently I think is still like hanging out in Crooksville.
And do you feel like your dynamic with all of them? I know you said obviously you knocked your brother's teeth out with a golf ball. And that, you know, you and your not your half sister have a like relationship as adults and everything? Are you pretty close
Yeah.
with all of your siblings? As like the oldest, I feel like that's
Yeah, I definitely think like I was saying earlier, as they have entered versions of adulthood, it's allowed us to get closer. Like there was never like a complete disconnect like while we were growing up, but especially like once I moved out and away, like it wasn't like they'd see me once a year and like, oh yeah, there's that guy who's our brother. Like it was definitely like an excitement every time I was there. But even at that point in time, I don't think I understood what it really meant to be an older brother, because I was like, oh, well,
you're still trying to be a person.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm like, 22, 23, like trying to figure out, I'm like, that girl didn't like me last
No,
week.
you're
Like,
we are 100% in your own like personal
Well, and
bubble.
so are they.
100%.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they're living
yeah.
their own lives. You're living your own life.
And
but
it's funny because like this is a complete side tangent, but like it's funny because I wish either of my parents were in a position now to give me another younger sibling, because me now I'm like, oh my god, I'd be the best fucking big brother ever.
you get to be like the fun uncle now.
And now I do. Yes, that is what replaces that. But like, when I think back to that, like we had like a normal like relationship where it was like, hey, I'm excited to see them. They're excited to see me. Awesome. Great. But then I feel like I said, it sort of was just like casual, normal, then went to like maybe a little bit below casual for a couple years. And then once they, like I said,
Hit actual adulthood versus
adulthood.
the angsty teen
Yeah.
sage.
yeah, it's like now we're, we can text and check in with each other and share things with each other, and I miss yous and all that sort of stuff. It's easier to communicate in that way. And it's also now, when things are going on within our family, we can also now talk about those clearly.
Right.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, yeah, this person's doing this and this is the reality of it. Where are you guys at with it? Do you understand? Oh, you do? Okay, cool. Like, it's easier when there's just everyone's adults or becoming adults all around. So what about you growing up, Leah?
So as far as like our dynamic as like siblings and my parents and everything, we grew up with like pretty close extended family. So we had a lot of like family get-togethers, like pretty much every weekend we were spending with my cousins. We went to church almost every Sunday for at least like a good chunk of my life. I can't exactly say where we fell off. But growing up, my sisters were 2 years apart, are 2 years apart. They didn't die or anything, but
Thank goodness.
Die or anything.
back then they were 2 years apart. No, yeah, so my sisters are 2 years apart, and then I'm 4 years after that. So,
It's also like, was it brutal being like all three girls? Because that's so
Yes.
much like hormonal energy.
we were really mean to each other sometimes. I wouldn't even say, like, I think that girls can be really brutal. Like, boys wrestle and fight, but it's like just getting rowdy. Girls, like, we want to kill each other. Like, it
That's
was
what it's like having a gay brother.
I never threw anybody through walls or anything like that. No.
It's the closest you can get to wanting to kill someone.
Yeah. I was definitely very emotional as a child. I was the crybaby. I was constantly like probably annoying the shit out of my sisters to a point where like they would beat me up and then I'd cry and then they'd get in trouble for it because I wanted to be a part of whatever the heck they were doing. And when they were older than me by like a lot, like when I was probably like, around 3 or 4, I would just see them doing stuff. And my mom would always joke. She's like, you'd see them doing something and you'd go, I do that. And she'd go, no, you don't do that. Like, because, they'd be doing stuff they weren't supposed to be doing. And I had this FOMO, and I think it's like translated into my adult life now, because as a child, I was like, I want to do what you guys are doing. And they were like, no, go away. You can't play with us. And I always felt like left out of stuff. So as my oldest sister started getting into her like teenage years, so I should say my school went kindergarten through 6th grade as elementary school. And then our junior high was 7th through 9th. And then 10th, 11th, 12th was the high school. So the very first year that I was in kindergarten, we were all in the same school together. After that year, my oldest sister kind of moved into her junior high experience, and she was having, friendships that became more important to her. And like, she was like kind of going off doing her own thing. And my sister Maggie and I got really close. I mean, we've always been close. All of us are, I mean, we have a good relationship even now. But Maggie and I used to, like, you know, we would play a lot together. Like, we would just get all our toys together and we would play, you know, we'd have like the stuffed animals down to the little action figures, and somehow we made it into some game where everybody was, I don't know, in the same world. But I liked that, you know, we could be creative like that. We got into playing video games together, which my oldest sister was never really into that stuff. So there were like random things that my sister, that's 4 years older than me, and we would be like in, I don't know, closer proximity as far as our interests go.
Yeah.
Whereas my older sister, she was like, I like lip gloss and I don't want to talk to you. Like, please stay out of my room and get away from me. So as we got older, you know, it did get to be a little bit catty because, as you know, teenage girls go, my oldest sister Jenny was the worst. And if she watches this, she will literally be like, ouch, but yeah. She just was like a troublemaker. Always like was having like these fights with my parents and like just had like, you know, mouthing off. And she was always very like, she's a very passionate person, and so things would get very dramatic and very,
That's how
like,
I was.
yeah, just things would blow up and she would boil over and it would just be like a teapot that was just, you know. And so she was very much like usually the one that was like getting the brunt of like the discipline parenting. My other sister Maggie was more of the, I'm gonna hide the stuff I did wrong and or blame it on you so that I don't get in trouble for it. And she just would try to deflect things. I remember when she got her first tattoo, she hid it for a while. Just like things like that. Like, I was very much like, I saw both avenues that they would take.
Yeah.
And I would just be like, you know what? I came clean about every little thing
I'm
I
going
did.
straight down the middle. I'm doing the bad stuff, but you're gonna know about it.
Yeah. To the point when I got my first tattoo, I told my mom, I said, listen, I know you're not like a fan of this, but when I'm like, you know, I'm old enough now to do this and it's something I want to do. So I'm sorry if it upsets you, but I'm going to let you know that it's happening. She still wasn't stoked about it, but at least it wasn't a surprise or a shock. But I think that our dynamic as sisters has changed a lot over time, especially as, you know, they have become mothers. And, you know, my sister Jenny got pregnant at 19. So I grew up at like 14 with like a tiny little baby in my house that I was, you know, babysitting all the time, and partly parenting as we all were, you know, taking part in helping raise him to become a human being. Another big thing that happened in my life that was kind of like big, just like forming of who we were as people and, you know, just like life changing, was that my dad was diagnosed with esophageal cancer when I was in like the 6th grade. And so a lot of the bullshit that felt like, you know, there's all drama happening here and, you know, fights happening there.
It's
a lot
all
of
trivial
it.
now.
Yeah. And it was still happening in the background as things do, as stress builds up in other places of your life. But that was like, okay, shit's hitting the fan. We're going back to church now. We're going to try to, you know, come together and like be the best that we can be for each other and for him in this situation so that things were as easy and like seamless as possible for his recovery. And he's, you know, been fine since then with all things considered in, you know, that aspect of his health. He's run into plenty of other things since then. But I mean, that was something that like I felt like I had to grow up really quickly. And I didn't really have that period where, you know, I was like 12 maybe. And so I didn't really have that period of like, oh, I'm transitioning into being a teenager. And I didn't get the moment to really have that selfishness to the same degree as most people I think get. And I think that was hard because I didn't know where to put all the feelings and the angst.
Well, because at that point, being the youngest, you are always living for whoever is in the room.
Yeah.
Like whether it's like, we got to get in the car to take this person to practice or
And
whatever.
I'm just along for the ride.
You're just along for the ride. So at some point, you're like, when do I get to drive?
Yeah. And a lot of, who I was as a kid was hand-me-downs, and what my sisters would like dress me up, and send me to school. Like a lot of who I was defined by who they like made me out to be. And I didn't have a lot of individualism until I got more so to like, high school age, like when I hit probably the 9th grade. So they influenced me a lot. I wanted them to include me in things. I wanted them to be not impressed by me, but I wanted them to approve of the things that I was doing. And I think a lot of our relationship, even now as like adults, has been built from like the dynamic that we had as kids of just like, my oldest sister is the one that was like trying to be bossy and make all the rules. And the middle sister is just like, fuck all the rules. I don't care about the rules, and I'm going to do what I want, like sneakily on the side. And then I was just kind of like, well, here I am. And my parents were very good, I think, at navigating us. My dad, bless his heart, with 3 fucking girls,
truly,
was very hot-headed. He has gotten so much better as time has gone on, and we are no longer living in his house. And he had a lot of growing to do in that way, where he definitely like had a short fuse. But my mom, I think, was able to kind of like bring everybody back a little bit. Like she kind of like kept everybody grounded in a way where it was like, no, we're not letting this get to this point, kind of a thing. Like she could wrangle in my dad and
it's kind of crazy
us.
because our first episode is the millennial problem, and how we just kind of talk about like, we're not really ever adults. We're like continually learning. And then we're doing this episode, and you can just hear the snippets of like, so my parents were learning along the way, and no one's getting anything right.
Yeah.
We didn't have all the, whatever it
Right.
is. It's so much like trial and error. But it seems like as far as your parents, no, they like kind of took accountability where they needed to. And
oh, absolutely. And I think that a lot of it was like, my mom was the only one of her siblings to have children. And so I had an uncle that had a stepson from a previous marriage, which, we're all adults now, but, and I probably have met him like once in my life. So like my mom's side of the family, like we were the grandkids. And my dad's side of the family, I was the youngest cousin. So like there were a lot of people on my dad's side to look to as far as like, parenting and things like that.
having a little bit more of a village over on that end.
Yeah. So it was like learning along the way was kind of like, I mean, that's what all parents and all people in general are doing for sure.
It's I love as a parent to hear what people remember from their childhood about their parents, kind of just like a tale to speak of the devil. Just like a telltale of like kind of what to look out for, because you don't really know what your flaws are and stuff until they've been like spread out for people to like
Oh, absolutely.
digest, and you never want that to be your kids.
Yeah.
So it's nice to like hear, what parents worked through.
Yeah.
I think everybody's always working through things, and there's never like, everybody says there's never a good time to have kids, but I think that there's never a situation where you're going to be the perfect human being. And then you're like, okay.
You don't know the work you need to do until it's faced you.
Exactly. And I think that like having a kid is like really like putting a mirror in front of your face, because they are you, and they're literally just parroting things that you've said back to you in a way where you're like, damn, am I like that?
Literally looked me in my eyes the other day. She didn't use it in the right context, but I still was like so impressed. Tough luck. And I was like, have I ever said that to you in your life?
I mean,
tough luck, Mom.
Incredible.
It sounds like you must have.
I don't know if I picked it up from her after she said it, but I did indeed say it like the next day to her. And I was like, I learned this from you.
That's amazing.
But they're just like little parrots.
Yeah.
They're little mirrors.
Exactly. And I think that like even as like adults, we show our parents things like that. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy because I mean, we can even get into like the now in our relationship with like our parents and our siblings and everything now. Like even as adults, like my mom and I had like a really meaningful talk, like when I went to Florida to visit her last, where we were up till 2 a.m. just literally talking about life and like philosophical questions of like right and wrong and moral, you know, beliefs of, well, why do you think this is okay or that's not okay? And this is why, you know, society has come to think that these are the ways that things should be handled versus when you were younger. Like my dad is one of those people that he's like, I'm old, I'm going to do what I want. And he's stubborn and he's trying, I think, and he's got like growth that happens to a point where like I can see, you know, that he's different now from like even when I was a kid, but he's just like, yeah, just like an old white guy, you know what I mean?
We gotta love him for, you know, we gotta meet him somewhere.
Yeah, he's just like wants to make everybody chuckle. And
That's
he's that
Larry.
person. He's I love that his name. What's your dad's name again?
Rick.
Rick, Larry, and Bill.
Yeah, remember
Oh,
because
yeah.
we did.
That's
It's
what
it's
it
our
was.
initials.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
Which
They
is
can
why
have their
we
own little
know that this,
podcast.
that this podcast was supposed to exist. That's how we know that.
Exactly. But yeah,
So your dad is just kind of stuck in his ways, but you love him for that, and he's
Yeah.
doing his best, and he's still a good guy within that.
yeah, he's definitely a good person and he has like the best intentions and the best heart. He's just like stubborn. He's like stubborn as a
fits
mule.
that mold that you know that guy. You know Bill. Like everyone knows a Bill, everyone knows a Larry, everyone knows a Rick.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. My mom is navigating, you know, her life now as like, you know, my dad's retired and she's like just trying to finish off her last few years of working. And I think that she wants to like, I think after she's done with that, she'll finally be able to take a step back and like really enjoy the things that she cares about and that matter to her. But she's always been like a giver. Like I remember I could never give her a gift card for like birthdays. She would just go and spend it on us. Like she's always been very selfless in that way. She's also very stubborn and I definitely get my OCD and anxiety from her. But I feel like she has those things and the reason that those things exist is because she strives so hard for like perfection in her life. My sisters, so I have one in Detroit and I have one in Connecticut, like I said, that's moving to Texas. And my oldest sister, she'll text me. I'm really bad at being the first one to send messages, and you guys know this about me because I literally
If people didn't reach out to me, it would be like I fell off the planet.
Yeah. So I'm like that, and my sister Maggie is like that. Jenny is the one that will reach out to us and actually be like, hey, this is going on in my life right now. Or even just like, she'll send me a meme, she'll send me a video.
Yeah.
Maggie, I'm like, are you okay? Are you alive? Are you breathing? Like she's drowning in like she's got all these kids to take care of and she's doing housework and she's trying to move, and it's like even keeping in contact with her is like so difficult, but when we all get together it's like we were never apart.
And she, like, I will tell you that if she were to listen to this and she hears you go, she's so busy, like I know that she'll get to me when she can, like she would be so thankful to hear that you're not like, yeah, she never reaches out and like not put all the clues together, you know?
And she tries. Like she'll send us videos every now and then, like photos, videos of the kids and what they're doing and what they're up to and what they're into, which I love. I love receiving that stuff because of course I want to see what my nephews are like, and I haven't seen her or my nephews or my brother-in-law for that matter in like 3 years. Like COVID hit and it was like I unfortunately, like she had, you know, her life stuff that came up. I had my life stuff that came up. The only reason I think I see my other sister as much as I do is because we live within like a drivable distance now. But I'm lucky enough that like we do, because I can go see her. I can take a day trip there if I feel like it or whatever. So she and I, we try to make plans, you know, to see each other and stuff like that. And then I'm hoping once my sister's finished with like all of her moving and stuff, that my other sister and I will be able to go visit her or vice versa. But I know that having young kids, it's not like she can just like up and leave them and be like, all right, let me just go to Columbus. And, you know, they've got a lot of stuff going on. So like I have a really great relationship, I think, with my family and with my sisters and everything. It's just, it's so stretched at the moment.
And I think that people don't realize that relationships ebb and flow like that.
Absolutely.
Like, and it, even if it feels stretched, it's probably like for the best at that time that you guys are able to give each other like the space to process, do whatever life thing you need to do.
And then, you know, when we come back, it's like, it's great.
Your siblings, it's just like another day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So how about you guys? I mean, I've been talking for a while now. Let's talk about your adult.
Okay, yeah, we're going into, you just covered like, okay, we did family relations in our childhood, now family relationships
as adults.
Yeah,
so yeah, let's go into.
Yeah, I feel like I have a pretty, again, I can't say it's like, oh my God, it's tremendous and it's amazing and we do all these things and blah, blah, blah. Almost what the expectations of society puts on like a amazingly healthy family, like TV family or something.
We play football on Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
it's
right.
only for families that have money.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. And so like I can't say it's that, but I also can't say it's like, oh my God, it's so terrible. I think mine is just very just like averagely in the middle.
Yeah.
Like I said at the beginning of this episode, I do feel like the black sheep of my family. I do feel like and again, I'm not talking about specific things just because like I'm creative and they aren't or something. I'm talking just about like how I think about day-to-day life is vastly just different. I'm sure there's comparisons. I'm sure there's things that are similar. I obviously got those thoughts from somewhere, but completely different life. So like I think mine now, I mean, it helps being an adult because you can have adult conversations.
Right.
Like there are definitely like I have had to play the role of parent to the parents in certain times over the years.
As we all do at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like mine, it is very casual, or like a very just kind of casual relationship. It's like, obviously when we see each other, it's great. We text, we'll, you know, all that sort of stuff. Am I like the perfect son and calling every day and all this sort of stuff?
Do you like how it is? Or you're like, this feels really good. This works for our family.
I think it works for the family. If I had it my way, we would actually be a little bit more like, I think the simplest way I can put it is like a higher energy, because that's like another
kind
thing,
of
like make
pioneer
that
yeah.
In ways, yes, because most of the time I am the most outwardly energetic. Like I'm the one that's joking. I'm the one that's trying to lighten the mood. I'm the one that's blah, blah, blah. And not that they don't reciprocate or something like that, but usually I'm the one that's leading that. But I ultimately don't think that can like change necessarily, because I think everybody's just sort of like you were saying, Leah, like everyone's sort of the version of them that they are.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's going to be some different days where maybe they're more of this day and less of that the other day, whatever. Can I pioneer it? Yes. Does that mean that they're going to lead or follow that lead necessarily? No.
Well, I always wonder, because I always feel like I'm not doing enough. So if I pioneered it, would it just become this clicked
well, that's like
thing?
that's half the mindset that I have to try and put myself in. Just straight up honesty is like when I'm going to visit, I am putting myself in the like, okay, you can't go and like be like the kind of quietest child.
You can't go lay on the couch.
No,
expecting people to be like playing with you and like joking with you.
No, and that's just, and again, like all of like younger cousins and all this sort of stuff, they're all like teenagers or entering adult years, and again, even they, like the way that they see the world and the way that they understand the world is so much different. And it's still just like, oh, I don't know. I can connect with you on the base level of like, we're nice to each other and we care about each other because we're family members and we'll joke around. Other than that, I don't necessarily know what to do.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's
I think that like saying pioneering the like relationship, or saying like, oh, if I like stood up and was the person to like lead the lead the way or whatever, I think that has to come from every side.
Yes.
Like I don't think that
it's got to be met. Like,
but and I always wonder though too, because like you're the youngest sibling, saying that in my brain, it's like my responsibility that like if I don't talk to my siblings for 4 months, that's all, in my brain. Not that it's true.
I agree with
that.
That
It's on me.
I also feel that way, where I'm like, I need to be reaching out I need to be let it, because again, otherwise they have just entered the doors of real life, so they're just like, what do I got to do? And I'm like, hey, been here for a while. I'll come check in on you because I know otherwise I won't hear. But it's like they're learning how to navigate. Like, what does it even mean to reach out to somebody?
Yeah.
Like they know, but they don't know. You know what I mean?
That's the thing is, like, I think being the oldest, you have almost like this thing where you're like, I feel like it has to be me. But as somebody who is the youngest, I will say, like, it's not that we don't know that we should be like putting in effort. Like, you connect to them, like you have your little spider web connectors to them, but they have those to you and to each other as well.
Yeah.
It's not like they're not fully capable of, it's a two-way street. And as adults, even if they're younger adults or less mature adults because they're not as far along in life as you are, it's still enough where you're like, no, this is my family, and I know that, like, I should put effort in.
Yes. No, yeah, I totally get that. And so, yeah, like sibling dynamic, like I feel like we talked a lot about that, to be honest. Like, that's sort of taking shape, however it's taking shape. I'm just glad they're all adults, so it's like, all right, cool.
Everyone's alive and well.
Happy
it is
and healthy.
Easy to communicate with them.
Yeah.
Easier to communicate with them. Again, if I had like a 3-year-old sibling, I'd be fucking stoked.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
It's a lot easier, I think, to interact with like kids, and then they hit like a certain age and you're like, I don't know how to talk to you, and then they become teenagers and you're like, I really don't know how to talk to you.
And I want my siblings to like love me more than anything, because I love them more than anything. But again, we live in such different worlds that sometimes I worry that that's not being translated in the right ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even like how I use my social media, like I see like people go on like family holidays and stuff, and they're posting all these pictures and videos of all of them and their siblings and moms and dads and all this shit doing everything. I don't really do that. One, because that's not totally the dynamic of my family. We're not all running around like cell phones out, like, oh my gosh, do that silly thing, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Which is like neither good nor bad necessarily. But I also like have kind of strayed away from worrying about showcasing my real family online.
Yeah, for sure.
And like to where I've even thought about like if and when I have a kid, like I'm probably going to do the, like, I'm like, I'm not going to show its face for a while.
I think that's
like,
more up to the kid themselves. You know what I mean? Like, and if they're not old enough to make that decision, then it's kind of like, you can wait. And I feel like Brittany is very good about that, where it's like she keeps her kids like private enough where it's like the people who need to see them can see them, and they're not going to be missing out on their growth or like the little moments that they have. But it's enough where it's like, I would hate to grow up today where it's like, oh, there's a picture of me in the bathtub that's cemented on the internet because you can't delete anything off the internet for good. So now it's there forever.
And that's like, so when it comes to like personal family things, like I've never even really been like, and sometimes it makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong, even though ultimately I'm like, I don't battle with it that much. But like, even when a family member has passed, everyone's, and there's nothing wrong with it, but like, grandpa passes and he's got a whole memoriam on your Instagram story all day. And I understand that's okay to celebrate that person's life, but there's been so much stuff that I'm just like, man, like, I don't want to post that my grandma died today necessarily. Like, I don't.
Yeah,
it
is tough.
It feels strange, but it feels like I should.
Yeah, you
but
think about
like,
it. Instead of mourning your grandma, you're like, do I have to tell everyone I know that my grandma died?
And it's like, oh, well, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And so I won't. And like,
part of it too is I think about like, would my grandparent want that attention?
Yeah,
would
are they even worried
care?
about it? Probably. And it's like, again, it's out of celebration. I understand. It's out of, hey, like I'm mourning this person. I'm sharing it on the social platform that we now all use to share everything. But like, that's the point I'm making, is like really like actual family things that are in real life like that. Like literally, I just posted a photo dump the other day for the first time maybe ever outside of a quick like story post or something.
Yeah.
I posted a picture with my mom and my siblings and like my dad.
I saw that.
I never do that, but I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm just, because again, my relationship with social media is also now changing to where I just care less.
Yeah, for sure.
Certain ways, and I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll share it. Who cares? But like that is like when I think about those sort of things, it's like, oh yeah, I'm not like grabbing selfies with my siblings on every family gathering.
So it makes it feel like you're not having the same family gathering as everyone on the internet.
It does. That's part of the reason that I genuinely hate holidays.
Yeah.
Is because it gives you this FOMO that you don't even actually have. There's not an actual, like, I'm not actually missing out on anything, but it's like this weird, like, oh my gosh, this person and their sister or brother or mom or whatever just took 97 selfies in the kitchen while they're making the pie. And for me, to be honest, at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't want to do that anyway.
Yeah.
I don't need all that documented, but there is that tiny thing that's like, what a interesting relationship they have.
Your
like,
family also, like, I feel like there are families, because they're, depending on the get together, there are members of my family that are like, let's take a photo
There's
of this.
picture families.
Yeah, there are
Zach's
picture.
a picture family.
It's one person usually. It's like your one aunt that's
It's
like,
his
everybody
mom.
get together. And I'm like, okay. And then everybody's together for the photo, and then you have the photo. So like my cousin Jamie, she's that person. She'll be like, let's everybody get a photo. Everybody get together. Like, we'll take a photo together. Like, take a picture with me. She's constantly posting her kids, which I love, because then I can keep up with, my cousin Jamie and Jeff and their kids. And then I've got like, an aunt that like, if we're all together, or like Nick's family, I feel like we get way more photos than when we're with my family, because like they just have that tendency to do that stuff more, because there's always just like one person that's like, let's all do this. And even if everybody's like, okay, the still have
picture's still
it.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's just like, it's a dynamic thing where if I don't know, if you're the guy with the camera, they're like, I don't know, do I take a picture? Ross is here. Like,
apparently,
he probably.
I don't know. I feel like that is not what I was supposed to be answering. I trailed off. Oh, I was supposed to give dynamic, like the answer to like what dynamic is with my parents now.
Yes.
Yeah, that spawned from like, it's very casual. It's just very in the middle. It's, again, difficult because I can identify I'm very, very different than my family and my parents, but I figured out how to navigate those things where, again, I've had to be the parent to my parents in different ways. It's weird and difficult because like my relationship with my mom is as good as it can be given the circumstances that her life is in. And of course, it's not my place to share all that on this podcast, but it's just not very good. She's not experiencing the best of things in life, which has then put a heavy strain on our relationship to where I don't really necessarily get to visit with her normally.
Yeah.
That's,
It's kind of like a trauma dump.
Yes. And also for my mom's side of the family, we don't get to experience anything normal anymore. We don't get normal holidays because the family's kind of broken and dispersed. Not like they've moved on and grown up, but just aren't getting along. And so it's like there's not like that everybody's here for Christmas or whatever. And how do I say this without there's nowhere that I can visit my mom necessarily. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah,
without,
there's not like a
saying
central
it.
area for you guys to have get-togethers where it makes sense and it would be comfortable
so
for
there's
everyone
just-
involved.
Exactly. So there's not really that like, oh, we're going home to this place and doing this. It's because, life is just kind of in chaos on that side of things. And there is it is going to be like a trauma dump thing. It's going to be a catch up. And then also like, listen to all this like bad stuff that's happened and
you don't want to have to take responsibility for things that
you
would
don't want
fall
to
on
leave
you
and be like, how am I going to fix X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, because you're
and
that person, I feel like, where you would be like, oh my gosh, like I want to do everything in my power to make sure everybody is like good.
And there are times where I have tried and I can see that I cannot bring all the sides together and explain, but every side thinks I'm not trying, so it's like that is where family dynamic does get weird. Is it terrible? No. Is it amazingly great? Also, no. It's very just like in the middle where, I'm not like, I don't have that like, oh my God, I can't wait for Easter to go see everybody. I'm like, if we could just skip it, I'm fine with skipping it.
Yeah.
Like I do love seeing family members when I do see them, but there's just so many of those like caveats to it.
Yeah.
It's like, I love seeing you, but man, we're so different. I love seeing you, but man, I don't know how to connect with you. I love seeing you, but there's all this weird trauma that everyone is dealing with and doesn't know how to deal with. So that's always a dark cloud over everything. So that's my kind of like, I would say right in the middle. I'm just right in the middle of like.
And then with your dad, would you say that it's like your dad's side?
I would also say it's like right in the middle.
Okay.
I would say there's.
I wasn't
not
sure if you were talking
as-
about both at the same time or
I
if
kind
you
of
were.
was. Yeah,
Okay.
kind of both
You
at the same
covered
time.
your dad a
There's-
little bit earlier too.
Yeah. There's less trauma on dad's side of the family. But I would say that leans more into just like the casualness of me just having grown into a rather different person.
Sure.
But otherwise it's like, hey, it's fine. But like, you know, like it's weird for me because again, we talked about like the pioneering the energy sort of thing. Like I will show up and I'm like ready to talk to everybody, and sometimes like usually when I go visit, it's like they're going about their normal day, and I just so happen to be there. They really wanted me to be there, but we're
I
not
think
the
that
family.
but you're like, but we're not that family.
It's like we're not the family that's doing a big event out of like, oh my god, everybody's here, and that's fine. But when I like, it's like a holiday, I'm showing up for whatever dinner. Most of the times, like I'm showing up, I'm eating dinner, no one's barely talking at all. Everyone's going about their normal day, going back to what they're doing, and then I'm just there.
Yeah.
And it's like, I understand there's probably a comfort of like, oh, we're doing our normal thing, but Ross is around. Isn't that fun? But also, I'm not here every week. I'm not, I live in a little over an hour away. Like, it is a holiday. Did I need to come down at all?
Right.
Like, yes, to see
Right.
family, but like, otherwise, we're just sort of, you're all watching TV while I'm here.
Yeah.
You know, you could have just did this without having to even make a dinner if you didn't want to. You know, that's a personal gripe more than anything. But like, yeah, I would say both sides. There's crazy, traumatic black clouds that surround my family dynamics, but I would say they still kind of both land somewhere in the middle of like, oh yeah, casual, like fine but casual relationship. B.
Yep. Me and my mom have a great relationship. We only being 20 years apart, even though that seems like a lot. I feel like we grew up together. We don't talk every day, but she is going to come stay with me for a couple months. So I'm really excited about that,
my
and for her to get
gosh.
closer to the babies. So ask me about that in a couple months, even though I'll just say like, I love my mom and I like have a great relationship, and she's someone I can look at and say anything. I could literally be like, I just murdered someone, and she'd be like, get in the car. We're going to Home Depot. So yeah, even though we're not as close as I would like to be, I think that that's just a matter of like life situations that have happened. And then my dad, like I said, he's working on it, and I've just had to kind of do the thing where I'm like, you are who you are, but he does try, and he's like constantly trying to make an effort. So it's getting a little better on that. He's just really wanting to like win over my little sister right now, and you can't. It's a losing battle, so he's constantly like livid
Yeah.
that he can't win her over, and I'm like, so it's starting all over again where I'm like, you need to respect who she is and not who you want her to be, which is the same conversation I would have to have with him as a teenager.
Yeah.
So trudging that up again, but I can tell that it's still from like where he really truly thinks is like a good spot. And it is for the most part, but you can't like buy love or like affection or whatever. And then my siblings, we are, Ryan, he's doing his thing and he's got kids and his life is great. He's been sober for I think 2 years, which is amazing. Brandon is working and doing cool stuff. He really wants to do like video game design. He's very like creative
cool.
with that stuff, and he's really smart. He's like one of the smartest people I've ever met. So he's always doing fun stuff with that. And Chance, he's a hellion. He's 21, so he's just like high all the time, running around.
Good for
like
him.
a hooligan.
Man.
And yeah, Quinn, she's my little bestie. It's so tough to go through the awkward teenage phase with someone and know that they'll get out of it, but they're deep in it and you can't do anything about it.
Right.
No.
And you can't.
It's such an isolating time because no matter how many people around you go, I was a teenager once. It doesn't.
You're like, you don't get it.
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
this isn't about you though, and it's
Yeah.
her own experience. And even though we've experienced things that I'm sure are very comparable, it's very much her own journey in her mind, especially. And when she hits this age, she'll be looking at somebody else that's
Yep.
14, 15 one day and go, oh my gosh, like I remember that, and remembering how much it doesn't matter who's around you and you have to get through those moments.
Yes. I'm just hoping she knows that like I'm trying, but I'm also trying to respect the
boundaries
where she's at.
That's also how I feel about my siblings.
Yeah.
Is I'm like, I want them to know that I'm trying, but don't want to like be pushy because I
Yeah.
don't know.
Like
I don't
how
want
much
to push them to
how
try
much
and open
space
up,
is
like-
too much space?
Yeah.
Am I bothering you? I've texted you 4 times and you haven't responded. Are you
Yes.
mad at me, or do you
Yes.
just have a million things going on?
Exactly.
I think like ultimately, like if any of my family watches this, I hope that they know that like I love them all a lot, and the only thing I could ever want to like improve is that we could all just like be closer
Yeah.
and talk more about stuff and have like a closer relationship to a point where it feels like there isn't a disconnect where it's like, am I bothering you? Like, I don't want to ever be questioning.
I want to bug my siblings or whatever and not care if I am.
Yes.
Just be like, you know, firing away and not being like, are they going to be like really annoyed and like not respond? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I have a bit of a, not to make this episode longer because we are getting up there, but I have a bit of a left field question. How, or maybe has death played a big part in your family dynamics? I ask that
Yeah.
because mine is an absolute yes. I have, for some reason,
Died?
I have died.
for some reason, I'm dead.
For some reason, I'm dead, and you were the only two
Super
people
left
that can
field.
see me.
So not to get all left field on you,
But I'm not real. From a very early age, I was introduced to death very close to me and saw how like my family had to navigate that. And then I feel like I'm in my brain, it's probably a little bit off, but I feel like for a minute, every like 2 years, there'd be a major family death. And yes, I know people get older, people get sick, people die, blah, blah, blah. But it was always like a weird,
I feel like I remember you talking about this.
Yeah.
Like you almost could time it out where you're like, oh, every other year you'd be like, well, somebody's going to die this year.
Literally. And so it's like that has, and again, that happens as we get older, you lose people and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of mine also happened when it was like, oh yeah, this person probably should, yeah, no, this was just like an
Yeah.
accident, or this was
Like
a
a
random
freak thing.
illness that popped up, or this is a whatever. And so that has also put a strange strain on a lot of my family dynamics, because it's like there is sort of this like, and again, it happens in every family.
Yeah.
But speaking from mine individually, it's like there is always these sort of like dark, sad clouds that are
Yeah.
looming around.
Well, and I think it can make people like drift apart, or it can bring you closer together in a lot of ways. Like if it brings everybody together, like for a funeral that you haven't seen everybody in a really long time, like that's a way that it can actually bring people back together for the first time in a while, or at least like to celebrate somebody's life. But if it's like a very sudden thing, and then there's like, oh, who's the executor of the will, who's getting what, is there money
luckily,
involved?
mine
like,
has never taken that
I
path,
have a
luckily.
lot of clients that talk to me about, you know, once their parents have passed or something, like they have a strained relationship with their family, because it's like
Yeah.
the true colors start to come out when it's like, oh, you get the house, why does this person get that and I only got this? Like instead of being like, wow, this person is gone and now we have to deal with that, it's like a fight over what's left of their belongings or whatever,
Yeah,
or what's
luckily
left of them,
Yeah.
more
so to speak.
for me, as far as like death, messing with like my family's dynamic, is when my grandma passed away, my dad's mom. She was apparently the fucking glue for every single one of our family members
Right. Okay.
at all, like including like me seeing my dad often and seeing my dad for holidays. We would go to her house. So when she passed away and then my dad and stepmom got divorced, I didn't want to go sit at my dad's like sad apartment on Christmas, you know. It's small and it's just for him, and that works for him, but then it took away this like my, you know, sitting at my grandma's, my favorite place in the planet. And there's no like getting back to that.
Yeah.
So that is the part that is
Yeah.
hard for me, is that like something that I was used to, that was stability for me until I turned like 23 or 24, was then just gone.
Yeah. Well, and that's a whole, it's like a piece of your childhood is also gone. Like, and like you said, the glue, like I didn't lose anyone until I was in my 20s. My grandpa was like the first person I ever lost. I'd lost pets. I'd lost, you know, like random, you know, parents, friends of the family, whatever, that like I was not directly in like contact with regularly. My grandpa was the first person in my life that was like, that when he passed away affected me in any way, shape, or form. And I don't think it necessarily changed the dynamic of our family. More so it was like how I saw the world and how it affected me as an individual. Because I am the kind of person that, because of my OCD and my intrusive thoughts, I always go to like the what ifs of situations, and I can dwell in the land of what if for a century.
I live there. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen you on the streets.
and I never got a chance to actually say goodbye to my grandpa. And that was a really hard thing for me of like, what if I had had the chance to see him one last time? Like, would it have made a difference to him to know I was there and that I cared and blah, blah, blah. My family has always been very supportive through those things. When my grandma on my dad's side passed away, who was like, on my dad's side of the family, we were always a lot closer just because, you know, there were kids on that side. We spent more time together. Everybody was in Ohio. So when Gummy passed away, it was really hard because she had been sick for a long time. But by the time it was over, we didn't, like, the only people that went to her, like, wake and all of that stuff were, like, her kids. Like, nobody else was even there. We ended up having a celebration of her life later on. It didn't feel like there was closure for a couple of months, which was difficult. But I don't think it was a strain specifically on, like, us as a group, more so as, like,
The toll of the
individual.
situation. Yeah.
Of, like, she was, like, we went to her house, for, like, Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve or whatever. And then, you know, suddenly she's just not there anymore. Like, she was usually like the comedic relief for one reason or another. And
We could have a whole grandma episode.
I know I don't have any
know if we should have a
grandparents
grandma
left.
episode.
You'll
I don't
cry.
know. I don't know if I'll get through
No,
that
that's
one.
like my weakness is old people alone. And so Nick has a grandma. He has one grandma left, and I'm always like, call your grandma, because
Yeah.
I get
That's
so
the moral
torn up
of this
about it.
whole episode. Everybody get off.
Yes.
When we
Close
say
this.
goodbye,
Go tell
say
your
hello
grandma.
to your grandma.
Of
Go tell
course.
your grandparents that you love them.
Yes. I don't know how you
Because-
just told any of that story without crying.
I
at all.
know.
I was starting to maybe potentially cry just listening to your stories. So maybe I
Yeah.
shouldn't have brought any of this up.
It's definitely like, it's hard to deal with the loss, but I feel like no one in my family has gone through these losses and had a less like meaningful relationship with each other, which I think is a good
That's
thing.
Good,
Yeah.
But I think that the way my family dealt with the loss of Gummy was like very rushed, and it felt a little bit like I had a second experience of not getting my closure, like in the
Okay.
same way. So when my last grandma, I never met my other grandpa on the other side. So when my last grandparent, my grandma, was like sick, I was actually on tour. She had a heart attack, and I said, I'm sorry, but I'm leaving. I'm not going to like make it to the last show. And my bandmates were always very supportive, and they drove me to the airport, and I went and I got on a plane to Florida, and she didn't pass away like right around that time. She was sick for a while before it happened, but I made a point to go and see her
That's
and
really
spend time
incredible.
with her because I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do this again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not to get into all the dynamics of
Well,
grandparents and
Great
sad
thing
shit,
that we
but
have an episode coming up this season
about
where we'll definitely be
grandparents.
crying.
Which one is that? I don't remember.
Death?
We're
Are
going to
we
be
doing
talking
a death
about
episode?
Yeah.
well,
I
it's
couldn't remember if we
grief
were-
in general. I think we've like got it so that it's kind
Yeah.
of
Oh,
but
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's going to be a hard hitting one for
yeah,
sure.
If we, I, as much as I don't want to cry, I do feel like if that episode isn't a death episode, I kind of maybe feel like there should be.
We'll
think
see how
it's
that one turns
definitely
out.
going to
Yeah,
be
and
like
then
that'll
go
be
from
one
there.
of the bullet points for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most likely. Well, look out for that, folks.
Yeah.
Something to look forward
Something
to.
to look forward to. You want to
just
be
like, yeah,
super
some-
fucking sad?
Yeah, do you want to cry? Do you want to listen to Sarah McLachlan and cry?
Oh my gosh. You are a Sarah McLachlan stan.
I am not listening to that song.
I'm
I
just
will not.
it's just
We'll
that
sing it.
yeah, those
No, I will not be here for when we do that.
What if I just sing it
cannot.
right now?
I will listen to support my friend in her first
just right
concert.
here at her first concert.
Did you explain the death dynamics of your? I feel like you did. Or did you not?
Yeah, about like just everything ceased once my grandma passed
Yeah,
away.
okay,
I could definitely
okay.
get more into it, but it can definitely be saved
We
for
can
the
save
grief
that for the
one.
episode.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
just
I'm like
remember you
I started
saying-
just going down a rabbit hole, guys. Sorry.
Yeah,
It's hard
But
not to.
that is
Yeah,
a
it
family
is, yeah.
dynamic for sure, though. I feel
No,
like
it
death
is a-
definitely can have a toll on things.
Yes, that can change a dynamic. That can make it better, worse, whatever it may be, and yeah, just figuring out how people deal with those sort of things. And like I said, for me, it's a huge cloud over a lot of my
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
dynamics that like have spawned a lot of things underneath that aren't just like, oh, this person passed away and this happened, we guess we deal with it in grief. It's like, no, this happened, therefore this happened, and then this
Yeah.
happened. So it's like there's been a lot of trickle down effects.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So we'll save that for a grief and death episode later this season. How do we want to wrap this episode up? Because we talked about like what our, we talked about the expectations that are sometimes put on what family dynamics are supposed to be, what our realities of those are. We talked about the siblings, the moms, the dads. How do we want to wrap this one up?
If you could say anything to your family, if they're listening.
Dude, I was going to fucking suggest
Well, I
that.
said it sort of earlier on,
Did
and
you?
then I
Okay,
just like
okay.
went on a tangent about
Yeah.
my dead grandma. So
Well, what better time to
I think
Bring
we
it,
should.
bring it around town. Beautiful.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Don't forget it.
Okay, who's going first?
Nose goes.
I am going first then. All right. If I could say something, if all of my family was listening right now, I would say that I love exactly how we are, but also sort of what we said to the sibling thing earlier is like, I'm trying how I know how, but if I knew more clarity on how much further I could try, I would. Does that make sense?
I wonder too, though, is that like kind of how our parents feel? I think it should be a different dynamic because
Yeah,
they're
I
our
don't-
parents. But
Right.
are they also just treading some invisible line that they think we've created?
I don't know, because like I feel like my family knows how open I am
Yeah,
about
that's
everything.
true.
You know what I mean? They see me talk on 97 podcasts all the time about everything. They know.
Yeah.
And they understand that. So like for me, it's like I would love for those dynamics to be there, but I guess I also don't know what necessarily, if that does serve a purpose, if it does get to a different result. It's not that I need anybody to change.
So is it
But
more
it
like
is-
you're reaching out to say if there's something different you could be doing? Is that kind of what you're asking to like to create a closeness?
Yeah, I feel like there's room to be closer.
Okay.
But I don't I couldn't say like, well, my dad never talks to me, my mom never like, no, those things happen.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just like I almost maybe there isn't necessarily a solution to it though, because there's nothing I think they could necessarily do that makes me feel less like a black sheep, because they didn't do anything to make me
make you
feel
feel
that
that
way
way.
in the first place. So there's, you know what I mean? But I think that would maybe be my thing is like, hey, understand that I feel this way. It doesn't make me feel any different about you. In fact, it makes me want to make us closer if any of us identify how. But again, I'm not going to like make that like that. Well, if we're only going to be a good family if we can solve this or make this better, because again, we are also two different types of people who do things in very different types of ways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I can openly communicate about anything. Other family members, they might try a little bit, but they're also going to be like, oh yeah, right. Okay, sure. You know, so yeah, I don't know. Was that a actual statement that I just shared? with you?
I think you like backtracked being nice. You were like, love ya, don't change a thing, but you do this thing.
Did I? What thing did I say that they
Just
don't
at the very end, you were like, when they're like, I communicate great, and they go, oh no.
Well,
just
that is
But
sort
no,
of
it's
that
true,
is
yeah.
sort of the dynamic. But again, I'm also
So
saying
meet
it's
you,
like
maybe meet you in the middle a
maybe
Yeah.
little.
meet me in the
Yeah.
middle a little bit more. But otherwise, yeah, it's
Fam's
it's
fam.
totally fine. It is what it is.
Fam.
Yeah.
Brittany?
I would say to my parents that I really love who I am. So great job for the
You're welcome.
great job on me. And
Man, maybe we shouldn't have done these family wrap ups. I'm over here. I'm like, I'm smarter than mine. You're like, I'm fucking amazing.
Oh my
I'm
god.
just
And
kidding. Everybody knows.
to my siblings, I do wish we were all a little bit closer. I don't feel as though we're not close. But I enjoy our time together when we get it so much that I'm always left wondering, why is it so few and far between?
Yeah.
And I think that we could have like better rapport if we figured out like a system to make like more time for each other. Yeah.
That's good.
Leah.
Leanne.
Leanne.
Yeah. To Bill and Janet. Thanks for just like being a unit and for like also raising me to be
Yeah, me and Ross
fucking
can't say the
awesome.
same about the units. So that was a good one.
No, but I think like it's been really important to be able to like watch my parents overcome a lot of things as a team, because it's helped me to never like give up on like the family unit that I've created for myself.
Yeah.
Because shit gets hard, but I got to watch them persevere and overcome a lot in their lives, whether it was sickness or job loss or just things coming and, you know, trying us as a family. And I feel like I'm really grateful that I got to like be brought up in a household where that all got sort of put on the back burner and we still got to be a family and we got to be like, you know, the most important thing.
Yeah.
And so thank you for that. To my sisters, I love you guys and I miss you a lot. Same thing. I feel like if I wish that we could, you know, overcome this distance a little better. And I wish that we could spend more time together or catching up or even FaceTiming in a way where it felt like it wasn't just like a text in the wind that may or may not be seen. But I'm grateful to have two such completely different people in my life that have shaped in a lot of ways who I am in my life and that I can go to for different things, and who support me in the things that I do. And, that will hopefully, if I ever have kids someday, like be people that I can go to about like just stuff about being a mom. Like you guys are doing the fucking thing. So thumbs up, you know.
I think we can give a big round table thumbs
Yeah.
up here.
Yeah.
If there's anything, we're probably all balling everything up in this. It's like,
Yeah.
of course, we are thankful to our parents and our families and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I would say all three of us turned out pretty all right.
Yeah, I would
regardless
say.
of the
Something
ups
went
or the
right
downs.
somewhere.
Something was right. There was some sort of
Because
solid
we're
foundation.
fucking perfect. And we
Yeah.
have
Because
the
we're
best
amazing.
opinions, and that's why we have a podcast.
Thank
That's exactly
all
why.
of our parents and families for making new podcasters for the world. Because where would the world
Everybody knows we needed them.
be without more podcasts? Anything left that we feel like we need to share or to say?
I think we wrapped
Other
this
than
bitch up.
Thanks to all the families for doing all the things.
Yeah.
Thanks, families.
Thanks, families.
Sam.
You're
Thanks.
seen and
You're
appreciated.
seen, you're heard. You're appreciated. Whether we say it as much as we feel like we should or don't know how to or whatever it is.
We love you.
We love all of
Love
you.
you.
And we love you, our dear listeners and viewers at home. Follow us at Honestly Same Pod. Like, share, subscribe, hit all the buttons because an algorithm somewhere needs to know that this show is of any importance to
And you've
anyone at
become
all.
our family over this entire
Yes.
That is
sequence
true.
of things that have happened. We've gone through a whole
Wow.
first season, and now we're into
Yes.
season 2.
We have to come up with a name for like
You
the people
call-
that listens.
Oh.
Didn't you call them Honestly Same Gang?
I did. I mean, that's fine, but
Oh, you don't like I thought that was
Well,
brilliant.
she's really into Taylor Swift at this very moment, so she's talking like Swifties. Like
Yeah.
she wants like honestly samers or
Honestly's.
what about
we'll,
like
we'll think it over.
yeah,
Samesies. Our samesies.
not too bad, not too bad.
That's the
That's
best
better
one
than
so far.
honestly's. I'm hitting this button.